They buried her in a pine box. I saw it, lowered myself, but that same night I saw her board the midnight stagecoach veiled down, trunk in hand. No one else believes me. They say grief makes a woman see ghosts. Maybe it does, but I know what I saw, and if you stay with me, I'll show you what really gets buried in a town like Marigold Bend. Spoiler, it isn't always the dead. The night Maybelle Crane was buried, the sky over Marigold Bend turned to ink, the kind of black that swallows, stars, and memory alike. I stood beside her grave that afternoon, my hands raw from stitching the lace on her burial dress the night before. She died too fast. 3 days from fever to coffin, no time for goodbyes, no final words, just silence, like the kind she always wore around men with power. The casket was closed. The funeral, quick. Reverend Greeley said his piece. The sheriff tossed in the first dirt, and that was that. Maybelle was gone. Only she wasn't, because just after midnight I saw her. I hadn't meant to be out. I'd gone to the well for water, couldn't sleep. That's when I heard it, the distant thunder of hooves, steady and low. I walked to the edge of town, toward the old stagecoach stop. No one uses it much these days, but there it was. The midnight coach, black as pitch, lanterns glowing like fireflies trapped in glass dot, and standing there, Maybelle veiled down, black traveling dress, gloves buttoned, trunk at her side. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She stepped aboard without a sound. The driver, an older man with a gray beard and tired eyes, didn't blink, didn't tip his hat, just flicked the reins. The coach pulled away, wheels whispering over dust. Southbound I stood there long after it vanished by morning. I'd convinced myself it was a dream, grief, shadows, a trick of the mind. But my boots were still caked in fresh road dust, and the well bucket I'd gone for still sitting by the stoop, untouched. The next day I told no one, not even my sister, not even the Reverend, because in Marigold Bend, women who speak out don't get called brave, they get called mad. But I knew my cousin, and I knew that wasn't a ghost I saw. It was Maybelle leaving, and the truth, it hadn't been buried yet. I couldn't let it go. The image of Mabel, upright, dressed in black, boarding that coach like a woman with unfinished business, haunted every breath I took. By the third morning, I walked straight to the undertaker's single quotes, as Mr. Brannock didn't look surprised to see me. He always said I asked too many questions for a seamstress, but this time I didn't smile. I asked to see the burial papers. He blinked, twice scratched behind his ear, and said, "Sure, Miss Whitlow, just a moment." I waited while he rummaged through a ledger the size of a saddlebag, then another, and another. He didn't find them. "I know they were filed," I said, voice tightening. "I was at the funeral." Brannock cleared his throat. "Well, technically, the papers weren't filed here. Sheriff Brandt brought in the coffin, sealed. Said it was pre-approved, said to fast-track the interment." "Sealed?" I asked. He nodded. Casket came in, nailed shut. No prep, no wash, no viewing. Just dress her and lower her. But who signed the death certificate? He didn't. Answer? I stepped closer. There was a certificate, wasn't there? Brannock finally met my eyes. "You should talk to the sheriff." I left the building shaking Dot instead. I walked to the church. Maybelle's shawl used to hang from the third pew hook. Every Sunday, same place, folded neat. I checked it was gone. I went by her house next. She rented the back room above the bank stables. When I got there, the door was already open, empty, cleaned out top to bottom, even the picture nail where her mother's photograph used to hang. To clean, no comb, no comb. No sewing kit, no ledger book. Maybelle was tidy, yes, but never erased. Walked home and poured coffee with trembling hands. Then I reached for the biscuit tin on the shelf, the one where she once tucked old letters. For safekeeping, Dot inside was just one item, a receipt from Hollow Point Bank, $30. Cash withdrawal, dated the day after she was buried. My breath caught in my throat. There were only two explanations. Either someone was using her name, or she hadn't been dead at all, not yet, and someone in town had helped make her so. For days after the funeral, word spread that Billy Teague's boy had found something shiny near the old coach trail, 30 miles south of town, just where the road bends past the dead cottonwoods. He brought it to the mercantile. Showed it to Mr. Graves. A small gold locket, heart-shaped. The clasp was bent, The chain snapped clean through. I saw it with my own eyes an hour later, sitting on the counter next to the penny jar. My knees buckled. It was Maybelle's. I'd helped her fasten it around her neck the week before she died. She wore it every Sunday, every payday, even in her sleep. It was a gift from her mother. I recognized the delicate engraving on the back. MC Walk, always with light. I picked it up, fingers trembling. The hinge clicked open. Inside, the photograph was still there. A young Maybelle and me, arms around each other, matching braids. Smiling like we didn't know the world could rot beneath us. I bought it off, Graves, for 50 cents. He didn't ask why. I returned home, laid the locket on my sewing table, and stared at it for hours. It wasn't just proof she'd been alive. It was proof she'd been trying to run. No one takes a keepsake like that into death. They take it on a journey. I went to the coach station the next day. Old Merrick was dozing in the ticket booth, hat pulled low over his face. I asked if anyone had logged a midnight departure the night of the funeral. He squinted. "Ain't no midnight stage, Miss Ada. Southbound coaches stop at 9 sharp. Always. But someone did leave," I pressed. "Black coach lanterns. Horses with white fetlocks." He blinked, his voice lowered. "I know that coach. Haven't seen it in years. Thought it was scrap by now. Barn fire took most of the line." "Then where did it go?" He didn't answer, just pointed south. "Some roads don't get mapped anymore," he said, "but that don't mean they ain't there." I walked home, with the locket pressed tight in my fist. Maybelle hadn't left because she was dead. She'd left because someone wanted her silenced, and I was just starting to hear her. I found the coach driver 2 days later, not in a stable yard or saloon, but outside the infirmary, nursing a bandaged hand and drinking coffee like it was penance. His name was Otis Wren, and he'd been driving freight and passengers since the war ended. "Are you the man who drove south the night Mabel Crane was buried?" I asked. He looked up, blinked slow, and said nothing. I held up the locket. "She had this. I saw her. She boarded your coach veiled down. Black trunk." Still silence. Then, like a dam cracking, his shoulders slumped. "I don't remember stopping," he said. "What do you mean?" I woke up at dawn with the reins in my hand, dirt under my nails, and the horses sweating like they'd run to hell and back. The seat beside me was empty. The rear latch was broken. I had 2 heel prints in the dust behind the wheel well, just 2, like someone stepped off but never landed. My breath caught. "You didn't take her to Hollow Point?" Otis looked up, pale as ash. "That's the strange part, miss. I don't go to Hollow Point. No one does," I whispered. "It burned 10 years ago." He nodded. "But that's where the tracks ended." I sat down beside him, heart pounding. "Do you remember anything else?" He hesitated. "Only one thing." "What?" "A smell." Before I blacked out, like lavender and smoke, like something was trying to be gentle. "About dying." I held the locket tighter. Otis dropped his voice to a whisper. "They told me not to talk about it. Sheriff Brandt, Reverend Greeley, said I'd imagined it. Said I'd had too much cough syrup, but I ain't touched a bottle in 3 years. I believed him because I'd seen her too." Otis finished his coffee and rose to leave. Before he walked off, he turned back. "If you find her, don't ask her to come back. Some folks leave because they're lost." He paused. "They leave to keep what they know from being buried with them." I watched him disappear into the alley behind the stables, and in the silence he left behind. I realized something chilling. Maybelle didn't escape the grave. She rode. Through it, the dream started after I brought the locket home. Every night the same, Maybelle lying in her pine box. Eyes open, lips moving. No sound, just the faint rustle of lace as her fingers twitched. She wasn't at rest. She was speaking, mouthing words over and over like a prayer I couldn't hear. On the 3rd night, I woke before dawn, sweating and shaking. I lit a lamp and stared at the floorboards beneath her old writing desk, the one she kept in my sewing room for when she came to visit. Something inside me whispered, "Look there, the nails were loose." The wood groaned as I pried it up. Beneath, the planks, wrapped in oilcloth and twine, was her journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page was dated 6 months before her death, ink sharp and deliberate. "If this book is found, I was never sick. Not really, just watched, just warned." My breath hitched, She wrote about the bank, how she'd been tasked with updating bond records, and how 3 pages had vanished. From the vault log, she made copies, stashed them in her trunk, wrote down names, 3 of them. Sheriff Brandt, Reverend Greeley, and Marshal Thorne, all respected men, all tied to the town's founding bonds, all present the day her coffin was nailed shut. The entries grew more frantic. They know, I saw. They know I copied them. Brandt came by and asked if I was feeling unwell, told me to rest. He smiled like it was kindness, but it wasn't. Greeley delivered flowers that were already wilting. Thorne said Hollow Point was a warning, said sometimes it's better to let fires burn than ask what started them. And then, the last page, if I don't make it, I'll try to leave another way. I have 1 shot, 1 night. The stage runs silent after midnight. That driver's kind, he won't ask. My chest ached. She knew. She knew they were closing in, that her silence would be arranged, that the town wouldn't bury her body, they'd bury her truth. I held the journal against my chest and whispered her name. She wasn't haunting me, she was guiding me. 1 veil at a time, Mabel Crane was. Lifting her own, the names in the journal burned through me like hot iron. Sheriff Brandt, Reverend Greeley, Marshal Thorne, men who shook hands with grieving widows, who baptized babies and eulogized the dead. Men who smiled like saints and kept secrets like devils. Didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I walked into the town hall and asked to see the burial order. Miss Edna at the desk hesitated, but I pressed, I just need to check a name for my own peace. She brought it out in a thin folder, stamped, sealed, and too pristine for something so grim. 3 signatures. Brandt, Greeley, Thorne, no doctor, no family, no coroner's stamp. Just 3 men with power and the authority to say, she's gone now. I copied it down. Folded the note into the journal. Then I walked across town, past the post office, past the mill, past the brass plaque on the wall that said, founded by grace and grit, minus 1,834. I knew better. This town was founded on fear, and Mabel had gotten too close to the truth that kept it standing. I stopped at the church. Reverend Greeley was watering the rose bushes. "Morning, Miss Whitlow," he said, all warmth. I didn't respond. Just stared. He paused. "Something troubling you?" I stepped closer, held out the journal. It was open to a page where his name was underlined 3 times. He read it, didn't blink, just whispered, "I warned her, or threatened her. She didn't listen. Is that why you buried her alive?" His eyes twitched. "We don't bury people alive, Miss Whitlow. We bury what shouldn't have surfaced. She would have torn this town apart. She was trying to save it from what he snapped. Debt, questions, uproar. I stepped back from men like you." He didn't try to follow, didn't shout, didn't even blink. That's when I knew he hadn't buried Mabel's body. He'd buried her evidence. But something slipped through. A heartbeat, a breath, a woman in black, veiled, boarding the midnight coach. You can seal a coffin, you can scrub a ledger, but you can't stop a story. When it's traveling, I waited until the moon was high and the town asleep. Took a lantern, a spade, and Mabel's journal wrapped tight against my chest. The cemetery gate creaked open without protest like it, too. Had been waiting for this night. Her grave sat beneath the crooked elm plot marker, already weathered. The ground looked undisturbed, grass growing like it had always been there. But I knew you don't see a woman board a coach after burial and go. On believing in neat endings, I started to dig. The soil came up soft, almost eager, as if something below wanted out. It didn't take long to reach the box, except there was no box dot, just a few broken boards, no nails, no silk lining. And at the bottom of the hollow, stones, big, round, deliberate, as if placed. Among them sat 2 things. A rusted trunk latch and Mabel's shawl, folded so perfectly it could have been waiting on a church pew. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling. They'd buried a lie, a weighted symbol, a coffin of decoys, enough to silence questions and close the ground. But Mabel, she hadn't gone into the earth. She'd stepped around it. The shawl still smelled faintly of lavender. My hands shook as I held it close. She left this for me, not just as proof, but as a torch. I stood and looked back toward the hills, southward, the the same direction the coach had gone, toward Hollow Point, toward the ashen echoes of a town the map no longer names, and in that moment I knew I couldn't stay in Marigold Bend. The truth didn't sleep here anymore. It traveled. I buried the stones again, not out of respect for them, but for her. To give the lie one last courtesy before I rode past it, then I packed my bag, wrapped the journal in oilcloth, folded the shawl, and left a note on my sewing table that read, "If anyone asks where I've gone, tell them I'm following the truth. It rides after midnight, and it's not done yet." It took 2 days to reach the rim of Hollow Point. I rode hard, through salt winds and black dust, past creek beds that had long since run dry. The trail south curved like it had a mind of its own, bending through places that didn't show on maps, over bridges that looked too old to trust, but the tracks were there. Stagecoach wheels, fresh, deep, as if they'd only just passed. I arrived. At dusk, what used to be Hollow Point now lay in ruins, skeletal buildings half sunk in ash, charred beams poking out of the ground like ribs. 10 years ago, fire gutted the town. Official cause, lightning strike. Unofficial story, bad. Paper burned better than bad men. No one rebuilt. No one stayed, except someone had a single lantern burned in the window of the old telegraph station. I approached slowly, hand near my coat pocket, where Mabel's journal sat. Inside sat a woman tall, still veiled. Down she turned as I entered it. Was her, older, thinner eyes, hollowed but burning like the lantern beside her. "Mabel," I breathed. She stood, as if expecting me. "You took your time." I couldn't speak. She crossed the room and embraced me. Her body was real, warm, not a ghost, not a vision. "I saw you," I said. "That night at the coach stop." She nodded. "I hoped you would." I pulled the journal from my coat. I found this. The stones, the locket, the driver who forgot. His own hands. "They made me quiet," she said. "But I never stopped writing." "Why Hollow Point?" She turned to the wall. Tacked, there were pages, dozens, financial ledgers, names, maps of land, trades that never made it to record. It wasn't just Marigold Bend. The whole region was built on falsified deeds and burnt towns. "This is where it started," Mabel said, "where they buried the first truth. I figured it's where it should end." I stared at her, the woman they called weak, delicate, forgettable. She'd become the ghost they feared most, not dead, exposing. We stayed up that night copying every page, because the truth couldn't write alone anymore. It needed a second witness, and I had just enough ink left to be one. We mailed the pages one by one, each to a different town, each sealed with wax and signed only witness of Hollow Point. We knew not all would make it, but some would, and that was enough. Mabel stayed in the shadows. She couldn't risk being seen, not yet. But I rode back to Marigold Bend, careful and quiet. The locket around my neck, the shawl folded in my satchel, the journal in my coat. I didn't go home. I went straight to the Gazette. Mr. Elwood, the editor, nearly dropped his inkpot when I stepped inside. Said I looked like a woman who'd ridden out of a storm. I laid down 3 things: a page from Mabel's journal naming the false bonds, a photo of the sealed pine box filled with stones, and a letter I'd written by lantern light with Mabel's, hand resting over mine, to those who buried silence and called it mercy. We were awake the whole time. He didn't ask questions. He printed it the next day. Front page, no edits, no headline, just the letter. By nightfall, the Gazette had sold out by morning. The sheriff's office was boarded shut. Reverend Greeley left town without a sermon. Thorne's name was scraped off the courthouse cornerstone by noon. The town didn't speak of it, but they felt it, the weight of something old and long denied, dragging its boots across their consciences. Some folks said it was witchcraft. Others claimed it was a cruel trick. But a few women passed me in the street, nodded slow, and whispered, "We saw her too," and I believed them. Because truth doesn't live in headlines. It lives in memory. It rides the back roads. It sits in shawls and lockets and journals, tucked under floorboards. And when it's ready, it returns, even if it has to board the midnight. Coach, to do it, it's been 3 weeks since the Gazette printed the letter. Mabel hasn't come back to town, not in body at least. But her name moves through Marigold Bend like smoke that won't clear. Quiet, lingering, unshakable. The town hasn't collapsed. The bank still opens. The bakery still sells its dialed bread. But something's shifted. Folks walk slower past the cemetery now. They pause longer at the stagecoach stop, eyes scanning. The South Road, like they might see a lantern glow in the distance. They won't admit it, but they know. The grave was empty. The truth was not. I still have the locket, still wear it tucked under my blouse, just above my heart. Not for protection, for reminder that Mabel Crane wasn't buried. She refused to be. There are stories now, whispers. A girl in Hollow Point said she saw a woman in black near the ruins. Said she offered her a canteen and directions home. One of Brant's old deputies packed up and moved east without a word, and every now and then, on a moonless night, someone swears they hear wheels on gravel. Not horses, not wagons, dot the coach. Rolling slow past the edge of town, no driver visible. No sound but wind through spokes and something heavier behind. The veil of glass, I believe it. Because I've seen where truth goes when it's buried, it waits. It plans, it boards the midnight coach with its trunk full of ledgers, its veil pulled low, and rides toward the next town that needs reminding. Mabel was never trying to haunt us. She was trying to wake us to say, not everything you bury stays buried. And some women. They don't haunt graves, they drive the damn stage.